Hi there, I'm Brian Levant, writer, producer, director, educator, and author, and most of all, toy collector. So I think it was very unfair to ask someone who collects as many things as I do to select just 5 of your most precious objects, 5 that mean the most to you. And it's really hard because I cycle through, do I want to show like my best toys, my Buck Rogers 1936 rocket ship, or the Popeye doll from 1928, or the 1939 Ideal Superman composition doll. That's a little show-offy. I wanted to kind of narrow it down to the toys that really reflected who I am and what I've done. And to do that, we have to go in a bit of a roundabout way. Number 5. One of the most pervasive influences in my life was the fact that I was born virtually at the beginning of the television era. And I, like millions and millions and millions of baby boomers, our first experience on TV was in kids shows. And the program that truly invented kids shows was Howdy Doody. I loved Howdy Doody. It was sensational, colorful, musical, great puppetry, great characters, terrific performers, and most of all, they were great salesmen. In those days, there was no difference between entertainment content and advertising. So Buffalo Bob Smith, this wonderful father-like figure, would literally tell mom, you want her to buy royal pudding and pie filling. Tell mom you want her to buy you Kellogg's Rice Krispies. And once in a while in the audience, kids would be waving these giant Tootsie Roll Pops. And I think that gave me an appreciation for collecting giant things. And one of their other major sponsors was Wonder Bread. Wonder Bread helps build bodies 8 ways. Wonder Bread was beautiful. It was like pop art with the red, yellow, and blue balloons, and Clarabelle the Clown honking in its favor. It was irresistible. And today I do collect Wonder Bread and Kellogg's items, but the Wonder Bread really kind of got out of hand. I have everything from a little tiny loaf from the 20s to the 29-foot by 18-foot sign that used to adorn the roof of the factory in Detroit. 4. I have to admit, since I was 5 years old and watched the premiere of it in 1957, I loved Leave It to Beaver. It was unique. It was the only show in the history of television that was truly told from the kids' point of view. It was beautifully written, well directed, and completely sincerely acted. And one of the first projects I attempted when I arrived in LA in 1975, I wrote 3 words on a piece of paper, and they were "Still the Beaver." And that was the jumping off point for me to try and revive the series and do what is now a fairly common practice of taking a show and turning what were the kids into the parents of a new generation. No one had really mounted a successful revival. And we were fortunate to first do a movie of the week for CBS that ended up being the 2nd highest rated movie of the week of the year in 1981. And in 1984, we debuted Still the Beaver as a series on the Disney Channel. It was tremendously successful. It was the highest rated show in the history of the then Pay Network. And they got in a fight with Universal over theme parks in Florida, and we were canceled after 1 season. Universal did the highly unusual move of keeping the show in production for another 13 episodes while they found a new buyer. And that buyer turned out to be Ted Turner at WTBS, and he bought a record 78 episodes of the show. And of course, throughout this process, I collected everything imaginable from Leave It to Beaver. The novelizations, the 4 board games, the 6 file copies of Leave It to Beaver Dell 4-color comics, and all the marketing materials we could find. And there was one object that I couldn't find. the Salafield Magic Slate. And I looked for over 25 years. One day, not too many years ago, on a whim, I went on eBay and there was one for $29, and I couldn't believe it. My hands were shaking as I ordered it, and when it arrived, I almost cut it in half in my haste in opening it. And so finally, after decades, I got my Salafield Beaver and Wally Magic Slate, and it really did symbolize the end of my journey with the Cleavers and with Barbara Billingsley and Tony Dow, Jerry Mathers, Ken Osmond, Frank Bank, and all the kids. And it was a tremendous experience. And when I did get this, it did feel like the end, and it was a very successful voyage. And I really do love it, even though it seems that the artwork was copped from the Salafield coloring book of Leave It to Beaver, one of 5, which I have all those too. Number 3. When I was 8 years old on a Friday night in September, I was one of millions of people who saw something new and unique. It was the premiere of the Flinstones on ABC from Hanna-Barbera Productions, and it was really a first. The Flintstones was the first primetime animated series. It was also a single storyline over 28 minutes. And it had tremendous energy, it had unique visuals, it was funny. In 1960, who would have ever thought that 32 years later, I would find myself sitting across from Steven Spielberg and Kathy Kennedy, pitching myself to direct the live-action feature film of the Flintstones. And it was an incredible creative journey that tapped every bit of knowledge I had about virtually everything to create this world and create an appealing world and be true to the animated version, at the same time be liberated by the opportunity to work with some of the finest craftsmen and art directors and artists and cinematographers and visual and special effects people. The Flintstones is the only collaboration between Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment, Jim Henson's Creature Shop, and George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic. And to be the conductor of this amazing orchestra was challenging and frightening and tremendously satisfying. And what was most satisfying, especially for a toy collector, is the fact that the things that we designed for the Flintstones became toys, became a pinball machine, became vehicles, models, action figures, PVCs, cookies, candy, everything under the sun was Flintstones. And I'm the one who got to make the presentations to everybody. And as a result, I was very lucky to be given like the maquettes for the Happy Meals. And to see the cars that I helped design, the Sabertooth 5000, which was built on the 1937 Delaplane, which was a car that I first saw in Topper with Cary Grant and Joan Bennett as the ghostly Kirby's. And it was also the inspiration for the original Batmobile for Bob Kane. So we took that general design and we built it out of petrified wood. And when Fred gets money, that's the car he buys and rolls around in his fancy zebra skin outfit. Number 2, I was fortunate to be the director of Jingle All the Way, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. The most fun part of that experience was designing a superhero along with Tim Flattery and my storyboard artist, Daryl Henley. We created Turbo Man, such a great and fun challenge. And then knowing that what we did would be translated into a 14-inch talking action figure that would be sold exclusively at Walmart. And we had visions of a movie about chasing the #1 toy in America, that we would produce the #1 toy in America that people would be chasing after. And unfortunately, the film did not fly like Turbo Man, and certainly the Turbo Man figures from Tiger Toys did not fly off the shelf, I'm sorry to say. And so How did this film affect me personally? I owned the 24-inch Turbo Man that was so central to the finale of the film, and yet I was so kind of embarrassed that the film wasn't everything that we expected it to be, that it sat in a very nice box in the garage for 20 years. And then a strange thing started happening. When I was on campuses, kids would ask me to sign their VHS family copies of Jingle All the Way, and I'd start to hear how watching the film became an annual part of their Christmas celebrations. And I saw something was happening. And now 27 years later, the film is held in very high regard, and there's been marathons on TV, and best of all, for the 25th anniversary, not only did Funko honor Jingle All the Way by reproducing the Tiger toy almost identically, lo and behold, it became the #1 toy in America, as we always dreamed of. And not only that, there are Funko Pop's fan art, and my friend Kasai in Japan, at Rumor Skywalker, and his friend at Hysteric_Creations have been creating magnificent, articulated, talking Turbo Man dolls, even featuring the voice of Dan Reardon, who was the original Turbo Man in the TV series. It's been a wonderful redemption. I've been invited to go to screenings of it over the years and see how enthusiastic people are about it, and the film has found a place in people's homes and in their hearts. And I thank Turbo Man for making that possible. Now, #1, okay. When I was 22 years old, I had my first story meeting on Happy Days. I sold them the first story that I pitched to them. They sent me out to do an outline. I turned it in, they liked the outline, they sent me the script, and right after I turned in the script, they said, we'll take it from here. I did not do a good job on my first script. However, they took pity on me and thought I needed seasoning, and they brought me in to observe the week that my script went into production, AKA the Fonz. And I learned so much that the following year they invited me back, and this time when I turned in my script, they offered me a staff job. I was so lucky to be so young and fall in with an organization led by such outstanding people, Gary Marshall and Jerry Paris, who had both been veteran actor, director, and writer, respectively. And they learned from the masters, from Carl Reiner, which was handed down from Sid Caesar, and the writing staff on Your Show a Show, which included Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Woody Allen, Larry Gelbart, and many other wonderful, wonderful people. And it was a wonderful organization. It was family-oriented, and they allowed me to grow as a writer and as a person, and they helped me to accomplish both. And never be more grateful to a group of people. And I was there on and off for 8 years, leaving to produce a series I sold, and it was gone for like 5 years, and came back and the show was still on the air, and Fred Fox and I produced the final 2 seasons. And now we are finishing up a book called 50 Years of Happy Days to celebrate Happy Days' 50th anniversary. And it's been wonderful to spend time reminiscing with our friends from the show and watching them and trying to distill this experience. And still, the most exciting part for me as a collector was, at the time, they were making gobs of Happy Days toys, action figures, board games, vehicles, Fonzie's Garage, all kinds of amazing stuff. And they still do. And in 1999, I believe, I got such a thrill. The Figures Toy Company made a whole line of Happy Days figures, including people who never got a doll, like Joni and Mr. and Mrs. C and Al Del Vecchio. And they did a couple of very special limited editions of Fearless Fonzarelli from when he jumped 14 garbage cans in season 3. And they did him in his overalls, working at Bronco's Garage, and they issued this one, Fonzie in his Falcons jacket, his original gang. And this he first appeared in in the third episode I ever wrote for the show, called Our Gang, which was a flashback to how Richie and Fonzie met. And when I saw this, what could be better? And this was the first toy that I ever had a hand in any way, shape, or form. And it still tickles me, and it reminds me of an incredible period in my life and a place where you learned how to obtain success and maintain it. And I've tried to live up to that for the past 35 years. Even though all these things are part of my past, because I live with them every day, they're very much a part of my present as well. Wonder Bread, building strong bodies since 1921.